Hello guys, my name is Andreora and I will present the paper What Code is Deliberately Excluded from Test Coverage and Why. Test coverage measures the percentage of code that is covered and uncovered by tests. For example, here the green lines they are covered by tests and the yellow and the red lines they are not covered by tests. There are several benefits to apply test coverage in our software projects. For example, they may identify untested areas of the code, it can facilitate code review, and make sure that the tests are not getting worse over time. Nowadays, there are several tools that you can use to apply test coverage. For example, Coverage for Python and Istanbul for JavaScript. However, it's important to note that not all code they are equally important for coverage analysis. This way, some coverage tools they provide a native support to exclude code from the analysis. So developers they can flag the code to be not considered in test coverage. So here I show a snippet of a Python code and we use a feature provided by the coverage tool in order to ignore code from test coverage. It's important to make it clear that code exclusion from test coverage can be used to do good and to do not good. For example, we can fine configure the coverage reports, we can exclude debug code, however, we can increase coverage reports, we can avoid test complex code with this kind of feature. Based on that, we propose an empirical study to better understand the coverage exclusion practice. Our empirical study has three major steps. First of all, we rely on the coverage tool provided by Python in order to perform this empirical study. Regarding the case study selection, we start from 68 popular Python projects. Then we detect that 55 of those projects they rely on the coverage tool. And finally, we find that 20 projects they perform coverage exclusion. So those 20 projects are the ones studied in this empirical study. Finally, we propose research questions to assess the frequency, the time, the code, and the results of test coverage exclusion. Now, let's move to the major results. Research question number 1. How frequent is code excluded from test coverage? After inspecting the 20 selected projects, we find hundreds of instances of coverage exclusion practice on those projects. Question number 3. What code is excluded from test coverage? So after inspecting the projects, we detect that most of the excluded code they come from conditional statements and exception handling. Specifically, we have manually investigated those statements and we find that commonly non-runnable, debug-only, defensive code, platform-specific and conditional import, they are excluded from test coverage. In this final research question, we assess why code is excluded from test coverage. We have manually investigated several commit messages in order to discover these categories. We find several explanations given by the developers. In summary, mostly this happens because the code is already untested, low level, or complex. To conclude, some very short takeaways. Developers they are using coverage exclusion to avoid testing but increase coverage. And of course, we need novel techniques to support those kind of coverage reports. That's it. Thank you very much.